This is Yolande Tomlinson with the Organization for Human Rights and Democracy and the U.S. Human Rights Network with a Human Rights Moment. Trigger warning. The contents of this recording, while important to building our knowledge and historical understanding of slavery in the Americas, as carried out by Europeans against African persons and their descendants, may produce mental, psychological, and emotional distress. This recording includes mentions of abduction, rape, torture, forced labor, other violent acts, and the overall understanding that slavery in any form is a violent and dehumanizing process. So please listen at your own pace, and please share this with all reposts. The transatlantic slave trade, also called the African slave trade or the triangular slave trade, was a devastating and brutal chapter in human history. It spanned from the late 1400s to the mid-1800s. During that time, Europeans traveled to Africa and directed the capture of approximately 15 million African people. Those 15 million captured human beings came from various regions, nations, tribes, and clans across the continent of Africa. They had lives, feelings, families, plans, ambitions, and dreams. Those captured were forced into boats and shipped to the Americas and forced to endure manual and sexual labor. The captured Africans were enslaved and utilized as property by the Europeans. This dehumanizing process is known as chattel slavery. The exploited labor of enslaved Africans produced incredible wealth, but that wealth was not shared with the enslaved people, their descendants, or with the continent of Africa from where they came. The wealth produced from the labor of enslaved Africans was shipped back to Europe or kept in America. And while the large-scale formal and legal practice of capture, transport, and enslavement of African people has ended, the remnants and impacts of the African slave trade and the institution of slavery itself continue until this day, in the form of the economic and political underdevelopment of Africa, the continued development and wealth of Europe and America, continued racial prejudice directed against people of African descent, and a culture of violence directed against people of African descent. In response to demands from civil society to recognize the continued impact of slavery on the modern world, on December 17, 2007, the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted Resolution 62-122, declaring March 25th of every year the International Day of Remembrance of the victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. The resolution also called for the establishment of an outreach program to mobilize educational institutions, civil society, and other organizations to inculcate in future generations the causes, consequences, and lessons of the transatlantic slave trade, and to communicate the dangers of racism and prejudice. Each year, the Day of Remembrance focuses on a theme. Previous themes have included celebrating emancipation, celebrating the heritage and culture of the African diaspora and its roots, victory over slavery, Haiti and beyond, women and slavery, honoring the heroes, resistors, and survivors, and breaking the silence. The theme for 2019 is Remember Slavery, the Power of Arts for Justice. In addition to the International Day of Remembrance, the victims of slavery are honored in a number of other memorials. New York African Burial Ground National Monument. Known today as a major global financial trading center, the island of Manhattan in New York has a buried history as a major slave trading center starting in the 1600s. As such, it was not a major surprise that a 1991 Manhattan construction project unearthed a burial plot for enslaved Africans. People of African descent fought for, and in 1993, won National Historic Landmark designation for the site. The monument was dedicated in 2007. Arc of Return. In addition to declaring March 25th the International Day of Remembrance, UN Resolution 62-122 also commissioned a Haitian American architect, Rodney Leon, to design and build a permanent memorial to the victims of slavery and the slave trade at the UN headquarters in New York. The memorial utilizes several triangular designs to recall the triangular slave trade and has 3 themes: acknowledge the tragedy, consider the legacy, and lest we forget. The Arc of Return is intended to contrast with the Door of No Return in Senegal, West Africa. Neg Mawon. The first successful slave revolt was launched in 1791 on the island of Hispaniola, which is now shared by the countries of Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Haiti celebrates the successful revolution against French enslavers with the statute of the Neg Mawon, or the Black Maroon, the runaway enslaved person turned freedom fighter. The Neg Mawon is a national symbol of pride and freedom and sits in the capital of Port-au-Prince, where hand-carved replicas are popular items among Haitians and tourists. The Door of No Return. There's a door of no return in Senegal and Ghana. The best known is inside the slave house of Gorée Island, right off the coast of Senegal. Captured Africans were brought here to be broken or tortured into submission, and ultimately loaded on slave ships to be taken through the door of no return. On every March 25th, we ask you to take time to remember and commemorate the victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade, the direct victims as well as the children of the victims who suffered. After taking time to reflect on and remember those ancestors, we ask you to take it to the next level. Honor them. After remembering the victims with your thoughts, honor them with your actions. Honor them by learning more about slavery and the movements that rose up to end slavery. Honor them by joining the fight against state violence. Honor them by joining the fight against economic exploitation. Honor them by joining the fight for the right to escape oppression. Honor them by joining the fight for democracy and self-determination. Honor the victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade by joining the fight for human rights. This Human Rights Moment has been brought to you by the U.S. Human Rights Network, building a people-centered human rights movement.